The woman, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling light, offered to take me somewhere more exciting. My world went dark as they roughly shoved a bag over my head. My heart raced as I realized I was being kidnapped. Through violence and fear, they forced me into their dark world. As I was brought before him, he descended from his seat of power. Without any introduction, he made me an offer. Today's shocking testimony is from a man named Timur, who was forced into serving Satan from his early childhood. His horrifying story reveals the cunning tactics the enemy uses to attack and destroy Christians. This is part 1 of this eye-opening testimony. Viewer discretion is advised. For those who are unfamiliar with this channel, our mission is to showcase authentic Christian testimonies from various corners of the globe, aiming to amplify the message of God's kingdom. We present testimonies about Jesus, the afterlife, heaven and hell, and other Bible-related topics in story form once or twice a week. Thank you to everyone supporting the channel. Now let's get into today's story. Everything began on a fateful day when I, a young and innocent child, approached my mother with a simple request. I asked her to take me to church for a baptism, a sacred ritual I had heard about and was eager to experience. Little did I know that this innocent request would set in motion a chain of events that would change my life forever. My mother, harboring deep-seated resentment within her heart, unknowingly provided an opening for darker forces to intervene. The devil, ever watchful for such opportunities, seized upon her negative emotions. She brusquely refused my plea, suggesting I go play outside instead. Disappointed but obedient, I ventured outdoors. The neighborhood was unusually quiet that day, with no other children in sight. Feeling lonely, I sat down and began playing with my toys, trying to entertain myself in the solitude. Suddenly, a strange woman appeared. She approached me with a friendly smile and began asking questions. Where did I live? How old was I? What were my parents' names? She even inquired about my home. Naive and trusting, I answered all her questions without hesitation. Then came the fateful moment. The woman, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling light, offered to take me somewhere more exciting. Enticed by the promise of fun and adventure, I agreed. As we stepped onto the road, I had no idea of the danger that lay ahead. There was a car parked there, an ordinary vehicle that would soon become the vessel of my nightmares. They grabbed me, their rough hands forcing me into the back seat. In an instant, my world went dark as they roughly shoved a bag over my head. My heart raced as I realized I was being kidnapped. As we drove, the car's motion making me dizzy, they pressed a cloth under the bag. A sickly sweet smell filled my nostrils, and I felt myself slipping away. When I came to, I was lying on cold, damp ground. The bag was still on my head, but I could sense we were outdoors. Harsh slaps stung my cheeks as they tried to rouse me fully. Tears streamed down my face as I began to sob uncontrollably. Their voices, low and menacing, warned me that any screams or attempts to tell anyone would result in the death of my parents and myself. Terror gripped me, silencing my cries. We were in a cemetery, a place of rest for the dead now defiled by the living. They led me to an area they claimed housed devil worshippers. With a scraping sound, they lifted a tombstone, revealing a hidden entrance. They lowered me into a room beneath the cemetery floor, the stench of decay and fresh blood assaulting my senses. Finally, they removed the bag. In the dim light, I saw their shadowy figures looming over me. They declared that I would now serve Satan. When I refused, pain exploded in my knees as they struck me repeatedly. I collapsed, my legs giving way beneath me. They sneered, saying that I would indeed serve Satan now. And so, through violence and fear, they forced me into their dark world. At that moment, I felt a strong urge to deceive them. Reluctantly, I muttered, "Yes, I will. Fine. Okay." Their eyes gleamed with anticipation as they commanded me to strip bare and climb onto the cold stone altar. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I complied. Tears streamed down my face as I lay there, exposed and vulnerable. The shame and discomfort were overwhelming, making my skin crawl. The group encircled me, their faces hidden in the shadows. They began to chant, their voices rising and falling in an eerie rhythm. The air grew thick with tension as they produced sharp blades. Without warning, they sliced my palms, letting my blood flow freely. Each member followed suit, cutting their own hands and mingling their blood with mine in a shared bowl. Next came the oath. They dictated the words, and I repeated them, my voice barely above a whisper. With each phrase, I felt a piece of my soul slipping away. This twisted ceremony, a dark mockery of baptism, bound me to Satan. It was as if the devil himself had stolen the sacred rite, warping it into something sinister and unholy. When it was over, they dismissed me casually, as if nothing extraordinary had transpired. Dazed and exhausted, I stumbled home. I collapsed into bed, desperate for the oblivion of sleep. But rest eluded me. After what felt like mere moments, though it had been 2 hours, I finally fell asleep. In my dream, I plummeted into a fiery tunnel that suddenly opened before me. The fall seemed endless, flames licking at my skin, their heat intense and unrelenting. Time lost all meaning as I tumbled through this infernal chute, the scorching sensation never fading. At last, I found myself in the underworld. The experience felt utterly real, yet strangely different from the world above. My body didn't feel like flesh and blood anymore. There were no bones, no blood vessels, just a rubber-like substance that could be stretched and molded at will. Then, unseen forces grabbed me, their grip unyielding as they dragged me across the hellish landscape. They pulled me towards massive gates, beyond which lay a throne. The ruler of this dark realm sat upon it, his presence radiating malevolence. The oppressive atmosphere of this place weighed heavily on me. Fear gripped my heart, and an overwhelming desire to escape consumed my thoughts. As I was brought before him, he descended from his seat of power. Without any introduction, he made me an offer, my life restored in exchange for a deal. Since my school days, I was the epitome of unpopularity, a social outcast unloved by my peers. This mysterious deal instantly sparked a fierce aggression within me, particularly towards those who had tormented me relentlessly. Without hesitation, I accepted the offer, eager to escape the situation. The deal we struck was simple. I would serve him for 5 years, and in return, he promised to fulfill my every desire. The implications of this agreement sent shivers down my spine, but I saw no other way out. The weight of my choice bore down on me, heavier than the oppressive atmosphere of the underworld itself. I had traded 5 years of my existence for a chance at life, but at what cost? Only time would reveal the true nature of our infernal pact, and I could only hope that I wouldn't come to regret my decision more than I already did. And once my time was up, would he truly honor his end of the bargain? In the blink of an eye, following a simple snap of fingers, I found myself transported to the familiar confines of my bedroom. As I opened my eyes, a profound sense of confusion washed over me. My identity and very essence seemed to elude my grasp. Those initial moments of awareness were hazy and perplexing, as if viewing the world through a fog-covered lens. This state of bewilderment persisted for approximately 2 weeks, during which I remained at home. My mother, concerned by my sudden aversion to school, frequently inquired about my reluctance to attend. In response, I would throw explosive tantrums, stubbornly insisting that I simply didn't want to go, offering no further explanation. My defiance often resulted in punishment, being sent to the corner of the room or even physical discipline. Yet, I persisted, telling my mother that she could never truly understand my predicament. During this time, a deep-seated hatred and an insatiable thirst for vengeance took root in my heart, directed at everyone who had ever wronged me. It was a smoldering ember, waiting to ignite into a raging inferno. Finally, after several weeks, I regained my bearings and reluctantly returned to school. The hatred that had been festering within me during my absence was now a constant companion, silently influencing my every interaction and decision. I was no longer the same person who had left those school gates weeks ago. I had returned, changed, hardened, and with a score to settle. The moment I stepped through those familiar gates, a wave of dread washed over me. I felt very bad, like I didn't belong there anymore. When I finally settled into my routine, things took a turn for the worse. They started bullying me. It wasn't just the occasional taunt or shove. It was relentless. Every day brought new torments, new ways they found to make my life miserable. The isolation, the mockery, the physical abuse. It all piled up until I could barely breathe. But something inside me snapped. Instead of breaking down, I felt a surge of determination. I thought to myself, no, I will not be a victim anymore. I will become stronger. I will get my revenge. This resolve burned within me, fueling a dangerous curiosity. I started studying black magic very intensely. It wasn't just a passing interest, it became an obsession. I began to study what it consists of, delving deep into the spiritual world and everything related to it. I spent countless hours poring over books, websites, and any source of information I could find. I studied various writers such as Aleister Crowley, absorbing their teachings and philosophies. I read different grimoires, ancient texts filled with spells and rituals. I learned about different magical symbols, their meanings, and how to use them. My thirst for knowledge was insatiable, and I tried to gain more information from every possible source. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. I wanted to experience the power firsthand. I tried astral projection many times but failed. Each attempt left me frustrated and doubting myself. But I didn't give up. I kept trying, night after night, determined to break through the barriers of the physical world. After many attempts, I finally succeeded when I started reciting spells. It was like a key turning in a lock. Suddenly, the barriers fell away, and I found myself floating above my body. As I continued my practices, I found myself to be very strong in this spiritual state. The more I immersed myself in it, the easier astral projection became. Each success boosted my confidence and drove me to push further. During one of these astral projections, I found myself in the underworld again. The transition was always the same. I projected out of my body and started falling into that fiery tunnel. It's a terrifying experience, even when you know what to expect. Every time you enter the underworld, you always fall through this fiery storm. The heat sears your spiritual form, the flames lick at your essence, but you can't stop the descent. Once I was there, in the depths of the underworld, I proclaimed my devotion. I declared that I belonged to the mission, to everything dark and powerful. I pledged myself to the demons, particularly to Azazel. Azazel is known to be responsible for magic, and there in the underworld, he became my teacher. He gave me a lot of information, teaching me secrets that few mortals ever learn. Every day, he would give me new tasks. These weren't simple exercises. They were like a payment for his teachings. To learn, I had to prove my worth by committing acts of evil against the light, against God. I didn't realize then the true cost of what I was doing, the damage I was inflicting not just on others, but on my own soul. When I returned to Earth after these underworld visits, I noticed changes. My mother started praying for me. She sensed something was wrong, even though I tried to hide it. Her intuition as a mother picked up on the darkness that was growing within me. I forbade her to pray for me. The mere thought of her prayers filled me with rage. I felt it very strongly on a spiritual level, even physically. It was like a burning sensation inside me, as if there was a flame within me trying to consume the darkness I had embraced. But my mother, bless her heart, didn't stop praying. She stood firm in her faith and her love for me. She said, "No matter what, I will pray. You belong to God." As I delved deeper into the dark arts, the rewards, if you can call them that, became more tangible and terrifying. At the age of 14, the devil rewarded me with one of his gifts for a serious payment. It wasn't a gift in the traditional sense, but a curse disguised as power. Through a simple handshake, I began to know how the person I greeted would die. This gift was horrifying. Every time I touched someone, I would see visions of their demise. By 15, I was teetering on the edge of insanity. This curse gave me constant nightmares. Sleep became my enemy. When I did manage to close my eyes, I was plagued by vivid, terrifying dreams of death and suffering. Insomnia became my constant companion. Demons were no longer just entities I communed with in the underworld. They became my constant guests in the physical world too. I often experienced sleep paralysis, feeling their presence holding me down, whispering dark thoughts into my mind. After one particularly intense satanic ritual called the Black Spot, the devil bestowed upon me another curse. This one was even more potent and destructive. I began to summon various evil spirits at will, the spirit of suicide, the spirit of diseases, and many others. With this new power, I started telling people how they would die. It wasn't just visions anymore. I could speak these prophecies of doom out loud. Not everyone believed my words, of course. Many laughed it off as the ramblings of a troubled teen. However, those who did believe quickly lost hope. They began to live as if it were their last day, not in a way that celebrated life, but in a manner that hastened their demise. These people started to get sick, fell into deep depression, and eventually died exactly as I had told them. By the age of 16, my reputation at school had completely transformed. People were no longer bullying me. Instead, they were afraid of me. I constantly whispered curses at those who had once tormented me, and strange things began to happen to them. These people were mostly non-believers, so it was easy to affect them. Their lack of faith left them vulnerable to the dark forces I was channeling. However, with believers, especially devout Christians, it was quite difficult. Their faith acted as a shield, deflecting much of the darkness I tried to send their way. This resistance only fueled my anger and determination to break them. We mostly targeted Christians who were newly chosen ones. These were people who had recently found their faith, whose belief was still fresh and potentially fragile. We primarily tried to break them, to distract them from God. Our tactics were insidious. In order to break their faith, we sent worldly thoughts, planting seeds of doubt in their minds. We whispered suicidal thoughts, pushing them towards despair. We suggested that maybe it was all a deception, that their newfound faith might just be a cult. Such thoughts were sent to them relentlessly, hoping to erode their belief from within. When attacking young or newly converted Christians, we would try to immerse them in entertainment. We pushed them towards various forms of distractions, social networks, video games, parties. The goal was to keep them so busy and entertained that they wouldn't read the Bible or spend time in prayer. We aimed to make them go to different places where sin is present, slowly leading them away from their path of faith. These tactics were often the most successful, as they didn't require direct confrontation with their beliefs, just a gradual shift in priorities. In cases where families had stronger faith, our approach had to be more aggressive. We attacked them with the spirit of witchcraft, the spirit of death, and the spirit of diseases. We sent these spirits to weaken them physically and emotionally, creating cracks in their armor of faith so we could act further against them. To find out where Christian families lived, went to church, or believed in Jesus, we had help from the dark side. In the underworld, there are demons who act as informers. These entities are everywhere, invisible to the human eye but ever present. They gather all the information from homes, churches, and communities, then report back to us. It was like having an evil spy network at our disposal. When we would conduct a raid throughout the city, we already knew where the Christians were. We didn't need to search blindly. In the spiritual world, we could see things that were invisible to normal human eyes. Christians who are sinful, those who profess faith but don't live it, are marked in red. Such homes, the demons and evil spirits already know that they can easily enter. These were our primary targets, as their weakened faith made them vulnerable. But there were some homes we couldn't touch. In the spiritual world, true Christians, those where God truly lives, are marked with fire. It's not a destructive fire, but a protective one. The entire house is composed of solid fire, burning from within with the light of true faith. It was like trying to walk into a wall of pure energy, impossible and painful. Satan himself forbade us from touching these fiery homes. He knew it was useless, a waste of time and energy. The protection around them was too strong. It was easier and more effective to attack others, those whose faith was weaker or non-existent. I learned this lesson the hard way. When I first tried to go against a true child of God, I almost died. The curse I cast did not affect that person at all. Instead, it rebounded, coming back onto me with terrifying force. After that experience, I became wary of even being near true believers. Even during bus rides with such people, I tried to stand as far away as possible. If a sorcerer successfully completed tasks, such as destroying a Christian in various ways, suppressing or emptying, or stopping them, they would receive different rewards and promises from Satan. The rewards varied based on the nature and difficulty of the task. Satan's system of incentives was designed to encourage more evil acts and deeper devotion to darkness. For weaker Christians, particularly those newly converted, Satan offered worldly goods as rewards. This could include money, material possessions, or other earthly temptations. When it came to Christians who had been with God for a longer time but weren't strongly connected to Him, Satan provided what he called gifts. However, these weren't gifts in the true sense of the word. They were actually curses disguised as powers, designed to strengthen the sorcerer's connection to the dark side. These gifts often came with a heavy price, corrupting the recipient's soul further. For strong Christians who had been believers for a long time but still harbored doubts about God's power, Satan's rewards were more substantial. He would grant an entire squad to add to the sorcerer's army, effectively increasing their spiritual firepower. Additionally, he would raise the sorcerer's rank within the demonic hierarchy. This ranking system was crucial in the dark realm, as higher ranks came with more power and influence in the physical world. However, there were some Christians who proved impossible to defeat. The key to their invincibility was the constant presence of the Holy Spirit within them. This was our biggest challenge. When the Holy Spirit dwelled continuously within a person, we were terrified. We knew we couldn't defeat the Holy Spirit in any way, and these Christians were essentially untouchable. The consequences of my dark activities began to manifest in unexpected ways. By the end of my school years, all of my former bullies had died from various diseases. Medical professionals were baffled, unable to treat or even properly diagnose these ailments. The root of the problem was spiritual, beyond the reach of conventional medicine. After completing another task for the devil, I was granted spiritual vision. This gift allowed me to perceive both the spiritual and physical world simultaneously. At first, it seemed like a powerful ability, but it quickly became a burden. The constant barrage of spiritual imagery, often dark and disturbing, was overwhelming. My life began to feel empty and monotonous, despite the supernatural experiences. For the first time since embracing the dark path, I started to yearn for something else, something more fulfilling. Thank you for listening to today's testimony. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing and pressing the thumbs up button. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments section below. As always, links to the original testimony are found in the description of this video. We look forward to seeing you for the next one. Until then, may the Lord be with you.